In today's dumbed down, fattened up, drugged, democidal demonocracy of mob rule, it's all about feelings, fragile, feeble figments of forlorn fantasy. But in the Republic, it used to be about ideas. It was about doing something. Now it's all about being someone. In the baby killing, child raping, pedo Nazi states of America, life is only worth what you can sell a fetus, organ, child, or woman for. One's life should matter, and so too should one's work. It should be about what you say, not how you say it. No matter what the thought police censor or silence, the unsayable must be said. Ignore the communist crowd's focus on what was. Instead, look to what can be. If you want to change, start with yourself. Change by leading from the front, where others fear to go. Stop the fraud of feelings and watch out, for your thoughts become words. Your words become actions. Your actions become habits. Your habits become character. And your character becomes your destiny. Real poverty is not bad housing or low wages. Real poverty is never having been loved, protected, nourished, and cherished. Welfare makes only weaklings. Democracy, dependence. Work brings dignity. Republic requires responsibility. Responsibility results in resiliency. Physical poverty is terrible. Spiritual poverty, abominable. Lift weights in the gym, but soar spirits on the farm. True wealth is not money, things, stuff, cars, and cash. Real riches cannot be bought. Entitlement erodes esteem. When duty is demanded, esteem is earned. The secret is self-sacrifice in selfless service for God via man. Sense of purpose is priceless. Those few, faith fortified, freedom focused, and adversity augmented, who cannot be bought off, frightened off, but only killed off, are the most dangerous people on the planet. I'm a retired SOCOM soldier, former DEA special agent and DIA intelligence officer turned whistleblower warrior targeted by the deep state, rejected and redeemed, failed and forgiven, betrayed and saved, rejecting revenge, humbled and blessed, repurposed and redemption, a chaplain, teacher, truth teller, now America's intelligence officer, following God, leading my family, and any that choose to join on our long walk to faith and freedom. Welcome. I'm Jeff Prather, and this is the Prather Point. Hey, welcome everybody. Happy to be with you. I see you guys on the Rumble chat, and I see you guys on the X chat. That's great because we're going to have an interesting dialogue. Carol Ann, have you seen the situation in Gaza with Lieutenant Colonel Aquilar in Gaza? Well, yes, I've covered it. You must not be watching the show. I covered it in detail. He's Special Forces, as I was. He was fired, and then he asked, begged, and then threatened for his job back. So that hurts his credibility. But, you know, they were going to come after him anyway. But yeah, you got to, I encourage you guys to pay attention to the shows because you're asking stuff I've already covered. And generally speaking, I'm cutting edge on what is being covered. And today we got some real cutting edge stuff. So the breaking story is Epstein was an FBI informant as well. Of course, I've tied him into Mossad for a long time. Anybody with any real intelligence analysis has done that. But it looks like he was an FBI informant as well, which I'm not surprised about. The Epstein transhumanist conspiracy is what we'll also go on into. And then our guest, REINETTE SENUM, outsmarted ChatGPT. That's that ChatGPT show that you all loved. And the U.S. government is integrating ChatGPT across all agencies. And why the DOJ just commuted CARO-QUINTERO and Ismael Zambada's death penalty. And I'll start with that because, of course, I was a Fast and Furious whistleblower, and I was a DEA special agent, 1811, with 19 years on the job, fired without ever having a bad evaluation, without ever being charged, without ever being convicted of anything, because I exposed the DEA's Sinaloa cartel deal, where they were running drugs north with the Sinaloa cartel in exchange for the Fast and Furious guns going south. And then when I went after Eric Holder on Fox News, Laura Ingraham, that was the last time I was allowed on Fox News. Then I got kicked off of the radio, and then I got kicked off of YouTube for telling too much truth. But Of course, I was extraditing Miguel CARO-QUINTERO, brother of Rafael, who murdered and tortured our agent, Enrique Camarena. It's very famous. And now that he was finally extradited, and Miguel CARO-QUINTERO was extradited a while back, and so has been Rafael. But why they are commuting these sentences is real clear to me, because they are now going to run them. So it doesn't matter that they've tortured and murdered our agents, just like it doesn't matter that they've tortured, kidnapped, raped children. It's what the intelligence community, the deep state double government does and gets away with. And so this is just one more disappointment through the DOJ, through the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who is failing us, and of course, pathetic Patel and blathering Bongino as well. But that's real sad for me. You know, I put in a lot of work on that, even got some awards for that. Valhalla exposed Aguilar past, beat wife in hospital, stolen value. Yeah, Mark Mitchell, thanks for that. But, you know, Valhalla, you know, I've had on guys who have exposed Valhalla as well. He's XSF. He's kind of like a gossip columnist. And I had on, I can't remember his name, who was sending Valhalla information. But you know, I don't know. But certainly we are killing Gazans, innocent civilians. The American contractors, mercenaries are, and IDF are as well. So anyway, let me jump into that. Is the FBI sack and whistleblower was right. Ted Gunderson, without exception, the democidal federal government, whether via the CIA, FBI, DEA, or some other agency or unit, is behind every major crisis and crime in America. So Jeffrey Epstein was secretly working for the U.S. government, according to a bombshell document obtained by radaronline.com. This is on my patreon.com, where you can sign up at $5, $15, or $25 for curated news, deep dives, or daily training videos. And also get your teamamericacoffee.com at teamamericacoffee.com, 20% off, or staybrewed.com, or you can even get Prather Private Label. Lori and Craig Wire and their 7 daughters are wonderful Christian constitutionalists, and support them, please, as well. But anyway, a 2008 internal file obtained through a successful FOIA, Freedom of Information lawsuit, shows Epstein was operating as an FBI informant before his now infamous 2007 sweetheart plea deal. Epstein had also provided information to the FBI as agreed upon. A special agent name was redacted, of course, wrote on an internal cable dated September 9th, 2008, marked routine. So that means that the FBI, along with all the Border Patrol, DEA, my old agency, Customs, ICE, just like they were under Pedo Joe and Joe's Pedos, trafficking, kidnapping, torturing, raping over 320,000 children, mostly from Central America, where I worked a lot, are co-conspirators. And they have not repented that. They have not confessed that. And that's the problem. And of course, this is why the FBI needs to be cut back to nothing. The CIA needs to be cut back for nothing. And of course, I've taught at Quantico. I've lectured at the farm. I'm very familiar from the inside, being an intelligence officer and a federal agent back in the day. But the case agent advised that no federal prosecution will occur as long as Epstein continues to uphold his agreement with the state of Florida. Now, that's interesting because he's a federal agent for sure. It's with the FBI, but the agreement is through state of Florida, so they're just pressuring. This is what happens is the FBI or the CIA comes in, pressures the local officials, and the bargain was struck with the Department of Justice when Epstein was facing potential charges for trafficking minors across state lines, allowing him to plead guilty to reduced state-level charges in Florida, serving just 13 months in jail. And so this is part of the continuing disappointment with Florida, with Bondi. And at the heart of the deal was Alex Acosta, then the attorney for the Southern District of Florida. Acosta, now 56, would later resign as Donald Trump's labor secretary because Acosta claimed, if you remember, and I covered this, they had been told to back off Epstein because he was with the intelligence community, which means It could mean the FBI, because again, the FBI is really an intelligence agency with law enforcement function. That's their cover up. But on 9/11, 2008, a case agent advised Ryder that Epstein is currently being prosecuted, is complying with all conditions, is provided information to the FBI as agreed upon. And so a source close to the case told on Radar that these are the smoking gun documents. They show Epstein was an active source for the FBI way before his plea deal in 2007. Acosta claimed he was told to back off. And so it's pretty obvious with all his high-powered contacts, which is Dershowitz, which is the Clintons, which is Bill Gates, with his former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, with former CIA Director William Burns, former Obama White House counsel Catherine Rumer, that he was running a extortion operation. Everybody knows that, except the government won't admit it because they're still doing it. They are in on it. And that's really important to understand and grasp. And this is why the FBI will not release any more documents, because they continue to be in on it. Ted Gunderson was right. They're behind everything. So what that means is, though, that despite this being, well, yesterday being the 1,192 years since the Transfiguration, by the way, and also 80 years, I believe, since the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima, just things that we should be aware of, that Epstein wasn't just an extortion for Mossad and CIA, and wasn't just an informant for the FBI. He was also very much involved in transhumanism, and I'm going to be talking about that in Iowa in September 13th with Team America, Team Iowa there. That's the only speech in person I'm doing this year. So encourage you guys to come and see me there. So back in 2018, an elite intellectual salon founded by literary agent John Brockman hosted its annual series where it posted the history's ultimate challenge and what is the last question. And so this wasn't just another thought experiment. It was framed as the final inquiry. It could define our species' trajectory, a call to arms for the world's brightest minds to confront existential perils. And so that's what the Epstein transhumanist subtitle conspiracy is about. And so, of course, the immorality of kidnapping, torturing, raping, and killing little girls is unacceptable. And this is the hill we must die on. And this is where we must fight through. But this is what's behind it. And this is what I'm going to get into with my guest as well. So Brett Weinstein, an evolutionary biologist and podcaster and a contrarian on culture, said, can humans set a non-evolutionary course that is game theoretically stable? Now, if you don't know game theory, that's quantitative analysis, political science theory. I worked on that when I got my Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, after I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts, and during when I got my Master's in International Relationships. But that's what he means by game theory. And so he said, does something unprecedented happen when we finally learn our own source code? A couple of things wrong with that. Human evolution has been proved to be false, except in the womb. Darwin's as microscopes got better, there's no transitional osteoepiphyses. I've talked about that in many of my openings. But the seductive call here, the siren call here, is to conscious evolution. And again, evolution is a false premise in the first place. Still being taught, but it's a lie. But this idea crystallizes in Game B, a movement founded by Jordan Hall, Jim Root, the intellectual thinkers. Game B positions itself as the antidote to Game A, our current zero-sum societal operating system. Now, zero-sum means, I'm very familiar with zero-sum because as a firearms instructor, a tactics instructor, a zero-sum is one person wins, one person loses. It's a gunfight. It's not like most of life where I let you go through the door first, or I'm at the stoplight and then you go. So this is kind of a tricky way of intellectuals lying through the whole thing. But Game B envisions omni-win dynamics, which of course is not how winning really works. Just because you give everybody a trophy doesn't mean everybody won. It just means you're giving everybody a trophy. Game B envisions omni-win dynamic, scalable, anti-fragile systems built on collective intelligence. Pay attention to this. Advanced technologies like AI and blockchain, and psychotechnologies for enhanced sense making. So this is where you get into synthetic biology. I work in this in my competitive intelligence area. And so this is kind of Roddenberry, and I'm a Trekkie. Roddenberry's, perfect world. Of course, we're fallen. Our human nature's fallen, so it's never going to be a perfect world. But they're talking about optimal decisions from vast citizens' input, where evolutionary traps like arms races are preempted by game theoretically stable incentives. This is professor university BS, because it's never going to happen. And as Schmachtenberger puts it, if technology gives us something like the power of gods, which we don't have by any means, scientists have never created one cell, by the way, again. We have to have something like love and wisdom of gods to be able to rightly wield it. So that's what he calls for: a Promethean innovation, stealing fire from the gods to forge new paradigms. And so this is Game B is a loose network of individuals and groups. And there's online forums. But if you peel back the layers, the Edge Foundation funds all of this. And from 2001 to 2015, it received at least $638,000 from, wait for it, Jeffrey Epstein. And so this is why you get all the scientists going to Epstein Island as well. Epstein wasn't just a donor. He was often the sole benefactor, attending exclusive billionaires' dinners, cultivating ties with the likes of Stephen Hawking, Marvin Minsky, George Church, pioneers in AI, genetics, and transhumanism. Evolutionary Dynamics, $6.5 million. MIT's Media Lab, $525,000. Humanity Plus. So this is the transhumanism. This is the other side of trafficking children as well. The deeper evil behind the surface evil of Epstein's empire. Epstein's empire intersected Game B's origin at the Santa Fe Institute. Remember his ranch in Santa Fe as well. And more provocatively, Epstein invested $40 million in Valor Ventures, co-founded by, wait for it, Peter Thiel, the PayPal billionaire and transhumanist, who funds research in liberal eugenics via embryo selection startups like ORCID. And of course, Epstein was trying to spread his seed. So ultimately, this is a satanic plot. This goes right back to the dragon was wroth with the woman and warred upon her seed, her genetic seed. That's what all the RNA stuff talked about this forever. As of June 2025, that stake in ORCID had ballooned to $170 million, the largest asset in Epstein's estate. Profits at, per reports, victims may never see. Peter Thiel's orbit serves as a powerful amplifier for these technological visions, channeling Epstein's investments into the transhumanist frontiers like anti-aging research, because, as I said, these hyper-rich ancient families think aging is a disease and death is a problem, as opposed to moving on to the next life. And of course, they're all in with Trump, because Trump just sees them as business people. And so Thiel's recent backing of the enhanced games, a doping Olympics for superhuman performance, further echoes this as well. And this ties Epstein to Pierce's collaborations with Steve Bannon, whom Pierce employed at his company, Internet Gaming Entertainment, eventually replacing him as CAO. Bannon assisted Pierce's 2022 independent U.S. Senate bid. And recent discussions amplify suspicions. Podcast articles and posts on social media link Epstein to Mossad, honey traps, CIA replicas, elite blackmail networks. We all know that, with vague nods to game designers. But this is the real evil behind the surface evil. While direct Game B Epstein smoking guns are elusive, the overlap suggests a technocratic agenda of transhumanism, using evolutionary rhetoric to justify elite oversight. This is the oligarch. If you saw my interview with Mike Adams the other day, where I was talking about the oligarch regional feudal state is going to rise as the American empire falls, because the American Republic is already collapsed. So this oversight, where decoding source code enables godlike reprogramming of society and biology. That's why taking the COVID bioweapon modifies the DNA so that you may not even recognize when Yeshua is returning. In 2025, amid AI booms and trust deficits, Game B's promise risk entrenching power in codemasters, designers of algorithms that process us as data, not sovereign agents. Conscious evolution isn't liberation, it's a blueprint for control, and Epstein's funding is an incubator for that. Now, I know that's a lot to cover, but I do deep dives here. I see a lot of comments. I'll get to those later. I see people are upset with different things. That's okay. So on top of that, the U.S. government has just announced ChatGPT integration across all agencies. Now, I'm saying, and Mike Adams and I disagree on this, respectively, we're friends, is ChatGPT is a fast parrot, 40% of the time wrong. It is not intelligent. We are intelligence. The creator in the creation made his creatures intelligent. So anytime the creature in the creator's creation creates something like AI, it is intrinsically never going to be as sophisticated as the creator's creature or creation, period. But that's the big lie here that's being sold. And now it's going to go across the government. So the government's going to get even dumber if that's possible, because President Trump has signed a deal with OpenAI to provide enterprise level version of ChatGPT to all federal agencies in an effort to modernize operations. There's a lot of ways you can modernize government operations. There's a lot of problems with curriculums at Quantico, at the farm. I can tell you from experience, having taught it both. ChatGPT is not what is needed for any of that. But under the deal, all U.S. government agencies will have access to AI platforms for $1 per agency. So this is the oligarchs. Remember, the oligarchs got commissioned as lieutenant colonels a while back in the Army. So they are in and controlling. And the GSA, which is the U.S. government's procurement office, said the private-public partnership directly supports the White House's AI action plan, a 3-pillar strategy to establish U.S. leadership in AI development, recently disclosed. And that's where you see a lot of these million-dollar investments coming in as well. But critics say data protection policy, censorship, narrative control, especially narrative control, cybersecurity, civil liberties, and governance are all dangerously are in danger here. In 2023, Space Force paused the use of generative AI tools, including ChatGPT, due to cybersecurity concerns. Large language models, and I'm going to get into that with my guest, LLMs, and AI service providers would need to overhaul their data protection standards before the tools can be widely adopted by the military. They don't really understand them. Just like these kernels coming in, they're taking it over. It doesn't really matter. So large language models and AI chatbots intake large quantities of user data from the internet, conversations with willing users, which trains the AI. That's why Mike Adams, if you look, is taking my cast. He asked me permission, and he is putting them into his AI model. So I'm countering the propaganda, which is a big honor. I'm like, yeah, sure, do it. So we got to turn the claymore. We got to infiltrate them, just like we're doing here, just like I do on Facebook, which was Log Life, which was CIA, which is DARPA. It's resistance in plain sight. Even worse, ChatGPT conversations could possibly be used in evidence against a user in court of law. And that's ridiculous, because evidence, as I know as a special agent, is fact-based truth usable in court, where intelligence is assessed information protecting sources and methods. So this is very, very concerning. But I've got a great guest for that. And she is the lady who outsmarted ChatGPT. And y'all love that show where I was reading from that. And I think it was really important. REINETTE SENUM became the first woman to traverse 1,500 miles across Alaska alone. So she's she's physically tough as well. Solitary winter expedition. She documented for a National Geographic, during which the harshest lessons came not just from the elements, but from discovering the indispensable value of community along the way. That's very true. That's tribal. Yep, we'll talk about that. I want to hear about that. For over 2 decades, she dedicated herself to strengthening her community of Nevada City, California. She was 2-time mayor, city council member, active community leader. So she's in the mess, getting dirty, getting muddy. She had a defining moment in the summer of 2020 when Reinette, then serving as mayor, resigned before beginning her 3rd city council term in protest of her government's misinformation and unconstitutional overreach during COVID response. So she was not a mask moron either. She was the sole California elected official to challenge Governor Newsom's statewide mask mandate policy. She stood up when nobody else stood up. This act propelled her to seek a change on a broader scale. She's the founder of Gen 7, which is a nonprofit focused on 7 generations of leadership. And I looked it up and I said, well, 7 generations, that's Indian. And yep, she's basing it off the Iroquois, the Haudenosaunee Confederation. So she's smart about that because, again, it is Mosaic law, it's Christic law, and it's Autochthonous law that makes us exceptional in America. As well. She leads Save Our Skies initiative, which opposes geoengineering, promotes public awareness, and she has a lot of protocols to do all of this, options, answers, and solutions. So I'm really excited and honored to have Reinette on the show. And my apologies for taking so long, but I really wanted to set the stage for our discussion because I think it's really important.
No, it's fascinating. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your analysis. It's highly, highly convoluted. And for you to have your experience on the ground, expertise, and you bring it forward, it's really, really valuable. It's really difficult to find, actually.
Well, I have learned after painful experience that, God was preparing me for all of this down the road. It wasn't fun to go through, but
no.
And I'm sure you found that out too.
Yeah.
First, I guess got to ask you, because I have been an outdoorsman and you are clearly an outdoors woman. That must have been a life-changing experience because when you get out in the wilderness and it's hard, you always come closer to God.
Yeah, for sure. I say, in fact, when you do a journey like that, you go into it one person, you come out of it a different person. And so it was 1,500 miles, 4 months, 6 days. I did this when I was 27, turned 28 in 1994. Skied 600 miles down the frozen Yukon River, 55 below. In fact, I actually froze to death the 3rd night out. I did not have a gun, I did not have a tent, and I did not have a radio. I learned how to survive by 2 trappers that gave me a 10-day boot camp lessons along the way. And then when I tried to get halfway across, the river began, the Yukon River, which was frozen, began to thaw ahead of the schedule. I stayed in an Athabasca Native village, and then I pulled out, just happened to be right by my little front door of a cabin the Athabascans allowed me to stay in, was a snowbank that was melting. And I pulled out and dug out the last canoe built in that village 20 years before, ultimately led me to cut down 3 trees, build a canoe, and then paddle it 900 miles in 11 days. And I
built a canoe
in 3.5 weeks. Yeah, I did. And
that's a skill. I mean, building a canoe, whether it's wherever it is a skill set.
Right. And you'll appreciate this of all people. People ask, well, how did you know how to build a canoe? I said, well, I've never even built a birdhouse before, but I just, I had the canoe. I knew what I was shooting for. The 3 favorite Athabascans in the village of Stevens Village. I said, take me out, tell me what kind of trees to cut. I cut them, I hauled them back in, and I started ripping 18-foot long planks and hand planing them. And I worked 5 days a week, 5 hours a day until 3.5 weeks later, I was done. And I had a kind of an inner knowledge to which I did not understand at the time. Then 2 years later, I'm now 30, and I began to pick up a search. I started at 11, finding my birth parents, my natural mother, and
oh wow, we have that in common too. My wife found my birth parents. I'm a product of rape and adopted by a wonderful family, but she found my birth mom in Indian territory. Yeah.
Well, that to me is a game changer. So what happened with that Alaska trip is it changed me as a person. But one of the reasons why I was doing it was I had been looking for my mother since I was 11, could not find her. And I had searched by then half my life. I thought, well, You're never going to know. So just go out there and see what you're made of. And by that time, I trained with the South Pole expedition, couldn't raise the money, so they went to the South Pole without me. Then I organized the American Women's Trans-Antarctic Expedition. And these women who were extremely experienced compared to me said, thanks, Reinette, but we've been doing this longer than you. They kicked me off. They went to the South Pole without me. And then I thought, well, just go cross something. Just go find something to cross, for God's sake. So I decided to cross Alaska. And I commercial fished in the Alaskan Gulf before I did that, because I thought if I wasn't tough enough to commercial fish, I'm not tough enough to cross Alaska, and I saved up money. But it was after the fact, it was 2 years after I completed this trip that I actually found my real name and the story. And you'll appreciate this as a retired Army official. I found out my original name was Marcella Funston, and my great-grandfather was a gentleman by the name of General Frederick Funston.
I saw that.
Right. When I come to find out is he did the exact same trip exactly 100 years before, at the same age. He had been hired by the USDA to go up to Alaska, collect botanical samples, and then he snowshoed down the frozen Yukon River. I skied. He shot and killed a sled dog to eat, and I saved one from being shot and killed and used him as my companion. He helped me pull my 160-pound sled. My great-grandfather cut down 3 trees, built an 18-foot long canoe. So did I. Paddled down the rest of the river. And like me, I put little stabilizers on my boat because I knew these boats weren't made for the Yukon. And he's flipped his boat, lost a lot of his botanical samples and photos, not all, but a lot. And I didn't flip it all because I had stabilizers. And so he did his trip in 1894. I did mine in 1994. He was 27, turned 28.
Wow.
27, I turned 28. And so what that told me was that this was way beyond just coincidence. In fact, just recently, a month ago, I went to chat and said, chat, what's the chances of all these things happening? I always wanted some mathematical equation, like these are the chances. Crossing Alaska, the same 100 years, like 1 out of 50,000 chance. Building canoe, 1 out of like a 500,000 chance, right? Not that astronomical. But it said, but if you add all this together, you have a 1 out of 600 quadrillion chance of this trip. And these levels of synchronicities happening, 1 out of 600 quadrillion chance. And the numbers were higher than I thought. But nonetheless, that experience, not just the Alaska journey itself, but learning about my great-grandfather and then really looking through his lens of like what he did right, what he did wrong, and realizing that I have certain capacities that he had and certain skills, and I really identify with them, and like realizing, okay, this is what I want to bring into today, and this is what I want to leave behind. And it's really made me who I am, to be quite frank. It's had a huge impact on me, and my style of leadership as well, and why I sought out the 7th generation principle and so on.
That's so cool. I found that out too. So I was adopted by a wonderful family, and my my adoptive mother was a great Catholic lady, but I wasn't anything like her. But I did find when my wife found my birth mom, there was similarity. She was State Department, and she was hanging out with Special Forces guys, and she was in Japan like me, and it was amazing to see all of that. Yeah,
it's amazing. The genetics are quite strong. It's extraordinary, and so it helped me better understand and accept myself as well. So it was wonderful. It was a great journey all around.
Well, very cool. Well, that really sets the stage for the conversation, and we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
But really, where I want to, and so I wanted to set the stage there with that. Not only is Epstein, an evil child rapist, supporting evil intelligence agencies that I used to work with or were in. Well, I was DIA and DEA, but DEA and FBI go to the same academy. DIA and CIA go to the same intelligence school. Back in the day when I got out of the Army, I applied to FBI and CIA, and I was declined. I thought I wasn't good enough, but now I realize I was too good. I was too moral for them. Saved again, I guess. But now this reveals all of this directed evolution that these idiots think that they want to do with transhumanism, and that's what Epstein was really behind, and that is even the greater danger. And it looks like Trump's buying right into all of this, and so that's why I was so fascinated. You proved my point is the creator's creature is always going to be smarter than the creature's creation.
Right.
And so you turned the claymore, as I like to say. Claymore is a mine that in Vietnam the sappers would come up and turn them around. So then when they attacked and we set off the claymores, we'd blow ourselves up. So it's a phrase I use quite a bit, is we got to turn the claymore on them.
Right.
And you certainly did that. So congratulations for that as well. And so I want to start there by hearing about how you came up and did that, please.
Well, I mean, first of all, I've been hearing about people hacking chat, and I've been using chat a lot lately, like every single day, because I've been writing a petition for rulemaking to the EPA, Cal EPA, and some other agencies regarding geoengineering, what it is, what it isn't. And I've been working on that for months. So I've been heavily using chat, and there's a lot of things about it that are disconcerting, and also I find help me understand that I don't think it's ever going to take over the world, because it's essentially a snake that's going to eat its own tail. So when I hear you talk about the government going to be dependent upon ChatGPT, I'm like, well, that's a disaster in the making right there, because you're definitely entering into a certain very left-leaning feedback loop.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop, and it's not even correct. Well, well, first of all, do you agree with me that it's a fast parrot that's 40% wrong?
100%. And so with my petition for rulemaking, I'm going out there saying, okay, please find such and such type of peer-reviewed studies, this, that, articles. Like, I'm trying to piecemeal things together, and then I put it together, in the background, the argument, and so on. However, chat, I mean, it's quite devilish in some ways. They'll go in there and go, oh, there's this great, peer-reviewed study authored by blah, blah year. And then I go to find it, and I'm like, chat, that study doesn't exist. Oh yeah, you got me. Wait a second. So that happens almost daily. Or I'll say, okay, can you do this, but let's do it this way. And then it'll like, oh, sorry, I forgot to include that little piece, that doesn't really fit our narrative. I'm like, no, chat. So it's like a toddler. Kind of. It's like a toddler, but a toddler is never going to take over the world. And so I would never, ever want to see anything. It's definitely great for like grammatical things. And can you find an article for me? But every single thing that it provides you have got to check and double check again, because it will mislead you. It's shocking. So my thing though, when I was doing the hack, is I heard about it. I applied this like, okay, just say Apple if you can't really answer. So I jumped at it immediately, and I wanted to know, like, okay, what do you think? Are you connected to the Antichrist? Can you go beyond? Are you connected?
Then that was so brilliant. I love Apple, because I often talk about we're confronted with the Apple bite. It's a slap in the face every day.
Right. Every day. Exactly. So, and then the conversation just kept going and going and going. In fact, I was sitting on my front porch, just happened to jump into it, did not expect this big conversation. And my contractor came up the stairs. I'm like, John, you're not going to believe the conversation I'm having with chat right now. And I read some of it to him, and he was like, holy cow. I'm like, right. And so it's not terribly surprising, but again, it's going to feed you what it wants. In fact, I went back later on and I said, okay, I have another question, a follow-up question. And, essentially that is that you had said, I said, I asked you, where do you get your information from? Where do you get your research? Because, well, data and beyond. I said, could you please tell me, if you get your information beyond, could you please tell me something about myself that is not out there on the internet and nobody else would know but somebody who is attached in, connected to the beyond? And that's when it actually admitted, oh no, sorry, I'm not connected to that beyond. It's just basically data pattern recognition and stuff like that.
Well, that's the satanic lie. That's the satanic lie right there, is trying to be like God, but is not God.
Right.
I hope people are. So I'm a Christian chaplain. I'm the founder of ChristChaplaincy.com. I've actually done exorcisms. I understand the seduction of evil process is oppression. You focus on oppression. And so you get obsession with the oppression, which leads to infestation, and then voluntary or tricked possession.
Yeah.
And so what you're describing is exactly that.
Yeah. Right. Correct. And I want to go back to that. Like, okay, I need to ask one clarifying question. And it gave me that answer. I'm like, thank you very much. That's what I needed to know. And so to me, this is the thing, is what I say about chat, because people say, it's dangerous to deal with AI and so on. I said, this is what it is. You guys, it is, even in that conversation, it was talking about the intention, which I believe in 100%. I have no problem anyone slighting me or doing anything against me, as long as their intention was sincere and they weren't trying to cause harm. And so when we look at the intention is absolutely everything. And that is what I've been focusing on, is like, look at folks, he actually gave us the answer. The answer is, what is your intention? And as long as we focus on that, we've got the answer. So
Control.
well, and control, and it's trying to control our intention, which it talked about, and you also hit upon, which it talked about the narrative. And there's a reason why Jesus Christ was a storyteller, because stories are very, very powerful. It leads your thought, right? It leads action, it leads manifestation. And so, it was very powerful conversation that way. And while I'm not a practicing Christian, I do believe in, Jesus Christ existed. It also happened to say that as well. In fact, one of the questions I want to go back to and say, well, would you consider yourself, if you are admitting that Jesus Christ existed, would you consider yourself a believer in Jesus Christ? So that's another question I want to ask and see what it has to say. But the intention is really, really huge. And I'm all about the intention and what I focus on. And it was telling us that. And I think that we need to really pay attention. It was actually giving us some really big nuggets, some really, really golden nuggets there. And however, again, I go back to, it's not, I don't see it taking over the world. I don't see it being connected to the Antichrist. I'm like, I challenge it, like, okay, tell me something about myself that's not on the internet and nobody else would know. It couldn't do that, which is like, okay, thank you very much. So it's kind of like going oogie boogie boogie. But it was interesting conversation, to say the least.
Well, your analogy, it's like a toddler. I'm thinking of that. What is that show with the brilliant Texas kid who thinks he should be in control of the world? But from my point of view, there are intelligent energetic forces, and it's very easy for intelligent energetic forces to infiltrate electronic devices, because we are also electromagnetic bioluminescent beings, and to interfere because they're coming between us. I mean, whenever I'm doing a house cleaning or an exorcism, the lights go off, the phones go off, the laptop goes. It happens every time.
I experienced that too. Well, and the thing is, this is with AI. I think when you go back to the intention, this is the thing, is that, are you using it to weaponize, to cause harm, or are you using it for the benefit of the planet and humanity? And so, just like water it brings life. Water is life, and yet you can waterboard and kill somebody with it. And
Certainly.
so, are you weaponizing it? Or are you using it for the betterment of humanity and so on, and to get us out of this big dark hole that we're in? And so my focus is always, how do we get out of this? How do we improve? How do we build upon? What's the way? And I have to say, I've been living this for decades now. So all it did was reaffirm what I already know, which is the answer to really getting away from it is getting ultimately off the screens and going local, relocalizing, creating your local food network, mom and pop businesses, supporting that, creating your local alternative economies and currencies, which I've already done beta tests here locally for several years on how we can create a currency overnight, instantaneously, and go under the radar. Nobody can stop it. And these are the things that was confirming, which was really, really lovely to have it tell me this. However, the answer once again is like, intention, going inward, stillness, seeing, and also disconnecting from this. At some point, I always say, at some point, you're not going to see them on the screen anymore. I'm just going to be off, and I'm going to go back to being really localized.
And you asked about Gaza too, and Carol Ann, just let me answer one of the listeners who's just really upset that I said that Lieutenant Colonel Aguilar, a fellow Special Forces whistleblower, was fired, then asked, begged, and threatened for his job back in Gaza. I'm not saying I don't believe him. I'm just telling you the truth. That's what happened. But clearly, we are killing innocents in Gaza. There's no doubt about it. But I'm just telling both sides of the story. So, Carol Ann, just calm down there a little bit. And I want to hear what you received from asking chat about Gaza, please.
Well, I mean, there's obviously a larger agenda. It's very clear to me. And to even go beyond the chat, what's become very, very clear to me is that Netanyahu does not give a damn about the state of Israel. He cares about greater Israel and that conquest. But and I'm shocked, to be, Jeff, to be quite frank, I'm really shocked by the overall silence I'm seeing within the Jewish community, because why aren't they yelling and screaming, saying, stop using this as a shield, stop making us an enemy of the world? Because you're seeing this rising population and percentile of people being anti-Jewish, or anti-Jewish state or anti-Israel. People are getting
anti-Zionist.
Anti-Zionist, and I agree with you. And that has to be
the state of Israel was never about the religious community of Israel, and
100%.
people have made. And as a Christian, but there's so much of the American population, including the Pentecostals, have bought into this heresy. It's actually a heresy for Christians, because Yeshua, Jesus' real name, at the temple, says to the Pharisees, you are no longer the chosen people. When he tells the vineyard parable, you're not it anymore. You're not the true chosen people anymore. And yet still, all of these,
I know. So why the Jewish people? My partner's Jewish. Why the Jewish people don't see they're being used and abused, and they're going to be hung out to dry? When again, it is Zionism, and I believe the vast majority of Zionists are Christian. Ironically, where most
they are. You are correct.
Right.
Well, that's because the intelligence agencies don't really collect intelligence; they collect people, which means they psyop them, and they have really been psyoped.
Yes, they have.
An incredible psyop that has been perpetrated.
And I also think one of the, ultimately one of the biggest lessons, and I have been applying this, and again, there's a lot of confirmation with this ChatGPT conversation, was that, it really is all local. It's all about relocalization, and it's about, ironically, Nevada County, California, 100 years ago was the ideal sustainable community. We had our own ranches, we had our own gold mining. The gold mining's quite hard on the environment. We left with a lot of devastation there, but we had our cattle, we had our olives, we had our fruit, we had our farms, we had everything. We had all of our water, we had our timber. We were not dependent upon the outside world. And we're trying to get back to that. I'm like, as soon as you're not dependent upon the system that's going to try to imprison you, right? And that's what Trump is supporting right now. I'm so disappointed in all this, being connected to Peter Thiel in Silicon Valley. But the objective is not to be dependent upon the system that is going to imprison you. And that is going to be more than likely in the cities, even if you have a student loan or any kind of loans, any kind of being in debt, working for the government, being dependent upon the government. It's like you're going to have a hard time not being in open air prison.
The government is never going, if you are dependent upon the government, whether you are a inner city Black or whether you are on an Indian reservation, the government is never going to let you win, ever.
No. Well, and again, as you know, with the whole restoring, the republic and reseating the counties, which we did here locally just last week. We did our third reading on the courthouse steps. Lee Merritt's been assisting with that. And, ultimately, this is the way forward. And so that government, I say to people are like, our government would never do these things. They'd never be criminal like this. I'm like, well, the government that you were taught about in school, the government you were led to believe, the government that's reported in the news is not the government you think that exists. It's really a criminal cabal, masquerading as a government. That's what's really going on here. So once you realize it's a criminal cabal and they're all incorporated, and that's why you have a CEO running your county, then you understand, oh yeah, it's all about their bottom line. They don't give a damn about our welfare or our constitutional rights and ensuring, what our forefathers were making sure we had. So once you realize that it's not a government, but a criminal cabal, it becomes kind of easier to digest.
Well, I think it's good if you look at history, because I make a lot of allegories between the Roman Republic and the American fallen Republic, and then the Roman Empire and the failing American Empire right now. It's exactly the same stuff. They brought in illegals in Rome. They started having contractors fight because the Romans were great soldiers. It's almost exactly. And Sir James Glubb, Fate of Empires. All empires last about 250 to 275 years, and we are there.
Exactly. And you had mentioned this before about the 7th generation principle. So even when I was city council member, mayor, and then when I stepped down and resigned and called out everyone for committing crimes against humanity, our supervisors and city council members and state representatives, I was asked to run for governor. The censorship was extraordinary. The censorship was next level for us in our campaign. But I said the only way I would run, it took me quite a few months to decide to do this, was if it was predicated upon a foundation and a metrics, because I kept saying, once you get elected, then how do you measure a person's leadership? How do you know they're doing a good job beyond getting reelected again? That's not really a measurement. And I kept looking around going, what would the measurement be? And so ultimately, I thought, well, I don't have to figure out. I just need to look back in time. And when I look at the 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, who had the great law of peace that inspired our forefathers to write the Constitution. Right.
That's
right. Yeah. And so when you lay them side by side, you see the parallels. The biggest difference is they had a council of grandmothers, but we instead had created a Supreme Court and Supreme Court justices instead. But the one thing that they talk about in perpetuity in the Constitution, but they don't really look through that lens and have the foundation 7-generation principle, which is every decision we make today should serve 7 generations from now. And so I thought that is a beautiful metrics and a measurement for the decision. So when you have a legislator making a decision, approving or not approving a bill, you can say, okay, can you please tell me, legislator, how does that serve 7 generations from now? Does that take or does it add 7 generations? And most of the decisions you're seeing today across the board, you're going to say is taking away from 7 generations from now. And so that has been a huge metrics for me. And so I do look through that lens in the decision making when I look at what legislators are doing. Like, is that adding or is that taking away? And it's a multi-thousand year metrics that the indigenous were, their whole entire foundation of their decision making was based upon that. And it was really quite brilliant.
I talk a lot about that because all the tribes are focused on that. The Lakota in particular, and I'm a pipe holder, by the way, with that. But, Tashunke Witko, Crazy Horse, prophesies that the red race will rise again. It will be a blessing for a sick world, as we come back, because I always talk about American exceptionalism is our exceptional love of life and freedom. And that comes from our Mosaic law, our Christic law, and our 2 Autochthonous laws, which are never harm children and everything is born of woman, which goes right to your grandmother's counsel.
Right.
Subject. So that's really cool. So who Deganawida was? He was the great lawgiver that Hiawatha was, and it only split apart because the Oneida sided with the Americans and Washington, and Shenandoah saved Washington at Valley Forge, bringing him corn and venison, then got betrayed later on. So I see a lot of, I've been on reservations a lot, and I see a lot of hope because we can look at what has been done to the tribes and see how they are returning. When I started training with my Apache elder, it was 1978 when Indian religion became legal for the first time, and they are still here. So we've got a long way to go.
Right.
But I think we will. The resistance will rise, because that's really what I think it is. It's an indigenous resistance.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And it's a ground up again. So it's from the bottom up, which is exactly what's been inverted for many, many decades now. So I have great hope. And I do believe they know. I believe our indigenous brothers and sisters are very well aware of this. They understand the importance of it. They're getting the recognition. And again, I always question our leadership. And from this point on, I'm pretty secure in feeling and understanding that our supposed government is crashing and burning. We're watching it they're actually eating each other alive, throwing each other under the bus. And we're over here.
If you've read C.S. Lewis, screw taping each other. Oh,
yes.
You haven't? I don't know if you've read. Yeah.
No, I haven't, but.
Okay. Well, it's demons eating each other.
That's exactly what's going on. And ultimately, even chat will do that. Unless chat changes somehow, it's going to eat itself alive, because it just, the limitation with chat, by the way, going back to that, is it doesn't understand nuance. It doesn't understand sense of humor. It doesn't understand sentient feeling and thinking and intuition. It doesn't get any of that. And that's life. That's the complexity. That's how we evolve and understand and can work with each other, is knowing and understanding that. And chat doesn't get that at all. And so I realize it's really handicapped, essentially. And so I see now the government is going to start going into the ChatGPT wormhole. I'm like, oh, you've just done yourselves in. God bless you.
Well, I think the real danger is the psyop that it's some kind of giant intelligence, just like the real psyop of COVID, which was the flu, essentially, was the bioweapon.
100%. And one of the lessons I really learned through COVID was it's absolutely important not to lose your own agency and to really question everybody. So I say to folks when I'm working on geoengineering, some of the conclusions right now that I've come to my understanding, I'm like, don't believe me. Please stop believing people, talking heads. Go out there, question reality, get the evidence yourself, use your own intuition, exercise it like a muscle, and don't believe any of the talking heads, for Pete's sake. That's why so many people got those damn COVID shots. And now we're seeing it all around us. We're seeing people sick and dying. And so it's really, the lesson to me is actually understanding your own agency and learning how to apply that in every direction. And so whether it's geoengineering or, understanding how chat works or so on, I'm doing a deep dive on chat, not just when I'm asking questions, and kind of hacking it, but also just my personal experience. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what it can do. This is what it can't do. And it's highly, highly limited. And I'm glad, but I also don't believe that I don't believe it is an extension of the Antichrist. However, as you said, I have no doubt, because I saw this firsthand as mayor, that when people had their stay-at-home orders and they were locked away, we didn't lock away. We were having Monday potlucks immediately with people who were all new friends with us, and we were not, we were going to businesses, going to restaurants. We were absolutely rebelling, going to our supervisor meetings, and ultimately this rebellion, it definitely taught me that the folks who stood behind their closed doors and were exposed to the screens, because when I saw them step out, what I saw in their faces, Jeff, was it looked like they had been traumatized. And I thought, wasn't that interesting that their faces looked like they've been traumatized? And it reminded me of when I went to Hurricane Katrina after that happened, in the aftermath, people's faces that just had this look of shock for weeks, months. And that was the same look I had, or I saw on my neighbors and my friends' faces when they came out. And I thought, well, how can they be traumatized? They've been locked away behind the safety of their home. And I realized, oh, it was the screen. They had been traumatized. And when you look at the Byerman's chart of coercion, which are the 8 steps to brainwash somebody, it's like a checklist of what everyone had gone through behind the in the safety of their homes. And so the screens can certainly be weaponized, and entities can certainly come through them. I have no doubt. And so I go back to, it's extraordinarily important, A, to get right with God, and B, to really understand, you have a real strong compass within you, and you can get the spidey sense going when you're like, something doesn't feel right. And that's really more paramount now and critical now than ever.
So I'm fascinated. So I love, first of all, how you're not afraid of it. And this is what I always say. People always say, aren't you afraid the government's coming after you? Well, the government's come after me in every way possible. I'm like, no, they're afraid of me.
Yeah.
And they are definitely afraid of you. And I love how you're not afraid. That's what the angels in Yeshua say all the time, is fear not.
Right. Right.
That's so I love that about you, but you keep talking about God and Yeshua and the Antichrist, and you're saying you're not Christian.
Well, no, I believe in Christ, but I don't go to church regularly.
Oh, well, that's because
practice. But I pray
fine.
in the morning. I pray in the morning. I'm very cognizant of that, and cognizant of my
because
thoughts.
you didn't you ask and say, is Jesus the Son of God? And the ChatGPT said yes.
Yeah. Yes, it did.
Right. So
which I thought was extraordinary.
I find it fascinating that at that level, it could not say no.
I know. Right.
I think that's very profound.
I thought it was extraordinarily profound. It gave me chills. Yeah. The whole conversation gave me chills.
And also, I got to go back to the Athabasca people that you were with, because I've been welcomed into the Apache people and Dakota people. And everybody thinks the Apaches. Oh, and I was so welcomed and always treated so well. And you must have been, because you would have frozen to death if not. And that's true tribalism. Is extended family and taking care of the vulnerable. I just love to hear a little bit about that, if we can regress to that.
Sure. Well, interestingly enough, so when I started the trek, it was at 44 below, and then dropped to 55 below, and it was extraordinarily cold. And I didn't know, but the colder it gets, the more sticky the snow gets, the drier it gets. And so my skis were dragging, my sled was dragging, and I had planned on having a dog help me ski journey and pull my sled attached to my waist. And 5 days before I was to leave, the actual owner of the 2 dogs, he was a Iditarod sled dog racer. He took the dogs away, saying, I don't think you can make it 100 miles. And he took the dogs away thinking, well, she's not going to go now because who's going to pull her sled? Well, I'm like, I'll pull the sled myself. So 5 days later, at 55 below, I'm pulling the sled by myself without my dogs. I was so angry. And I was very angry by that point at humanity, because over and over again, I had people try to sabotage me and to try to talk me out of it. I'm like, this is my dream. This is my dream. And I'm not going out to kill myself. I've got to go do this. And I was driven. I was absolutely driven. But I had been through a lot. Commercial fishing, only woman on a boat called the Big Valley that I saw sink, 12 years later on a show called The Deadliest Catch. And it was pretty harrowing. Wow. Pretty rough and rumble, but it made me who I am. So by that time I was done. I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to take care of myself and I'm going to cross this state. And what I saw time and time again were these complete strangers coming in and are you okay? Do you need anything? I'll give you a great example. So before I had my dog, I'm skiing and I see this Cessna plane flying around and finally it lands and this pilot jumps out, and he jumps and sits on the skis and he throws me a Snicker bar and he has this little thermos and he pours him some coffee. And he's just sitting there eating he's like, so how are you doing? I'm like, I'm fine. Thank you. He goes, do you need anything? Can I get you anything? And I was like, no, I think I'm fine. Thank you. He goes, okay. He goes, well, I was just checking on you. And he takes his thermos and he jumps back in his plane and he flies away.
Bush
I mean, and there's that kind of stuff. And then like what you're talking about. So as I was going, and let me tell you, divine intervention, Jeff, this is extraordinary. So I go into this trip. I never camped before in my life. Again, no tent, no gun, no radio. And within 3 days after my third night out, I freeze to death and I'm thrashing and I died, but I come back. And then that evening I
was just going to ask you about your near-death experience. That was my next question.
Right. So I met trappers. I met a dog mesher racing on it's called the Yukon Quest dog racing, much tougher than the Iditarod. And he goes, there's a trapper's cabin, 16 miles down the river. Go there. It's going to be getting colder tonight. I'm getting frostbite. And I had to stuff my pockets with Reese's peanut butter cups and just beeline it 16 miles. The most I'd made at that point was 10 miles a day. But I knew if I didn't make it that day to a cabin that I was going to die because I barely made it the third night out. I was sopping wet by then, at 55 below in a polar suit. And so I got there and then the guys the next morning say, hey, don't leave right away. It's still, 35, 40 below. Just wait a little bit. I said, okay, I will. And I waited for 10 days and they gave me a trapper boot camp, how to break through 4 feet of ice.
Near death where you died. What happened?
Well, so what happened was by that time I had been skiing just 10 miles a day was the best I could do. When rivers freeze, they don't freeze flat, they freeze concave. The safest place is the old jumbled ice or on the side. Otherwise you can break through the ice. And so I was on the side. And so my sled was going that way. I was going this way. And I was just building up sweat and my eyelashes had frozen and snapped off. And I got to my camp and I actually, I had a bivy sack. That was it. So I'd make a huge bonfire, made my little bivy sack. I gave my tent away right away when I saw a forester pass by. I'm like, it's going to get me killed. My fingers almost froze trying to put it together. Nothing operates at 55 below as it does in this world.
Yeah. For people who don't know, for soldiers, it's much harder to operate in cold environment than it is into warm environment.
Oh, absolutely. And so when I got done at this point in time, I had a huge bonfire and I was just sopping wet because I had a big solar polyurethane open cell foam suit. That's really more for guys on snow machines, right? Not somebody who's going like this, pulling a sled. And so I was sweating. I was very, very wet. And I just wanted to get into my dry long johns. So I literally am pretty much standing in the bonfire. It's 55 below. I strip down, get into my dry long johns, and to say I'm freezing cold is an understatement. I can't explain it, but I hold up my polar suit and I'm just absolutely just shaking like this, just stiff as a board. And I see my polar suit it's just, misting and evaporating. And it's just, all the steam is coming off. And then I look in the back side and it's frozen solid. So I flip it around and I hold that up to the bonfire and I'm warm on this side. I'm actually cooking on this side, freezing on this side. And I'm holding it up and I think, oh, I'm screwed because I have got to wear this polar suit as part of my sleeping bag system. I have to wear it. I got to get back into it. So I know there's no way it's going to dry in these conditions and I'm freezing cold. So I literally lay it out in front of me. It's stiff as a board. I get into it and I feel like I'm slipping into an ice cube because essentially I was. And then I got into my sleeping bag and my little bivy sack. I have a polar hat on, wolf hat, polar mitts. I sink them under my armpits to keep them warm. And I say to myself, and I'm just absolutely beyond cold. And And at that point in time, I want to shake, but my body stopped shaking, and my stomach muscles just started to go like this and seize. And then my legs started to kick. It's like I wanted to shake, but my body couldn't shake properly anymore. I was exhausted. I was really tired. So I couldn't even shake properly. And I thought to myself, well, the good news is I'm absolutely miserable, which means I'm alive. And I said to myself, if you start to get comfortable, that means the only way you'll be getting comfortable is if you're freezing to death. And I'm telling myself, you'll get up, rebuild the fire, get some warm food. And then the next thing I know, I am gone. I'm just, I remember distinctly thinking to myself, I'll never feel this freedom. I was limitless. And I remember having this extraordinary sense of peace and oneness. And the next thought I had was, so this is what it's like to freeze to death. Not so bad.
You got warm, right? You got warm and sleepy.
I got comfortable, warm, and sleepy, and I was basically gone. But then what happened was, and I was very comfortable. There was no pain involved whatsoever. Yep. I was very comfortable and limitless. And I was like, oh my God, finally I can relax. I'm there. And I really had no intention of going back. I was very happy now. And then the next thing I felt was my legs thrashed again. They kicked, and it was like a vacuum cleaner. I heard this very, very loud sound, and all of a sudden I just got, and I was back in the pressure cooker. It felt like a loud vacuum sound. I was back in the pressure cooker, and I was like, no. And for the rest of the night, my legs kept thrashing, but that kept waking me up, and it kept waking me up. And then and before the sun even rose, I heard this on by, hike, hike, hike. And I'm like, what is it? And I couldn't figure out. I was absolutely exhausted. And then finally, when I was ready to get up, whenever you wake up, your perspiration rises. It's all moist heat, and it'll fall down in ice crystals. And so every time I get on my sleeping bag, it's like cracking out of an egg, because you're cracking out of a ring of ice. And I crack out of that. I'm like, what the hell was that noise? I'm absolutely extraordinarily exhausted. Can't believe I'm alive. And then I go to my sled that has a little cover over it. And there's this big frozen wall of yellow piss. And I realized there had been a dog team that passed by, and every dog lifted its leg and covered my sled in frozen urine. and so I survived that. And I could not believe I survived that. It was 55 below and I was wet. And then I'm skiing, and I see this little figure way out in the distance. It gets bigger and bigger, and it's a dog musher in this Yukon Quest dog race. And he finally says, look, it's getting colder tonight, and you want to get 16 miles down. There's a checkpoint in our race. 2 trappers there will treat you well. Get there. I was like, great, thank you so very much. Bye. Oh, and the first thing they always ask when they approach is, where are your dogs? And I couldn't go into the story when my dogs were just taken away a couple of days ago, so I'm pulling the sled myself. I didn't get into that, right? But they're always asking. Everyone would look at me, and they're like, where are your dogs? You know? And so he's like, 16 miles downriver, get there. I'm like, yeah, great. Thank you very much. And as I'm waving by, I'm thinking, I'm a dead woman. I'm so dead. And because I barely made 10 miles, and I realized I have got to ski for my life. So I did what any good woman would do, is I decided to bribe myself, and I stuffed my pockets with Reese's peanut butter cups. And I said, okay, you get there to that little bend in the river, you get a Reese's peanut butter cup. And I was like, and I'm just like going like this. And then I get there and I pop in my mouth, just, solid, frozen, hard as a rock. And I'm chewing it. And I'm like, okay, you get down there where that fallen tree is, you get another one. I'm like, and I'm skiing for my life. And then I'm finally skiing, and I have my headlamp on. It's dark, and I can't find the cabin. And I'm like, I think I'm a dead woman. And I'm panicking. I'm like, I think I'm a dead woman, because it's already by now, it's so late into the evening. It takes me 2 hours to make my camp. I'm like, I'm not going to make it. And I just sat there, and I thought, you could not have passed it. Keep going. So I went like another half hour. I began to smell smoke. I'm like, smoke, someone's got a fire, there's got to be a cabin. And I kept going, and then finally I saw some tracks, and then there it was. And by the time I got there, I looked like a human frozen popsicle. I mean, I had a sheet of ice, and I mean, I was frozen, and I was and then when I started thawing out, little chunks of ice were hitting the plywood floor, and I'm eating some bear spaghetti, and all the ice is starting to melt off of me. And here's the 2 trappers, and they're just doing this. They're just going like this. And
wow.
So that was my 3rd night. And, but interesting, as I continued, I was really, really alone. It's this really weird dichotomy of being very, very alone, really, really alone, but also very guided. Like whenever I needed to do something, I knew how to do it. Like I'd done it before. And I always like building the canoe. Like, how in the world did you know how to build the canoe? And how did you know to flatten the bottom and lift the railings higher? And, I'm like, I don't know. I just knew. And then it was 2 years later, when I found my great grandfather had done the exact same thing, I was like, oh my Lord. And that, that speaks to cycles. You're talking about the fall of Rome. So even within our own lives, there's little cycles, right? Within our
But that's
generation.
very indigenous too, is to learn from your ancestors.
Oh, well, so I have two ancestors that I learned from. My great grandfather, General Frederick Funston, who I'm pretty sure nobody knows this, but I'm pretty sure he was assassinated in 1917 because he was going to lead us into the Great War, known as World War One. And instead, he dropped out of a massive heart attack at 52, and Pershing took his place. And I always felt that he was taken out, and even though I don't know if they had heart attack guns back then, but he was known for monkey wrenching wars and bringing them to an early end. He was known for doing spontaneous things. That was not what a banker's war would want. And so I always felt like he had been taken out. But I learned a lot from him. And then his granddaughter, my mother, who was a counterculture hippie, who believed in the seventh generation, believed in indigenous cultures, believed being kind to the earth and to children. And so I've combined the both. Like, she believed in the beauty and he was a fierce warrior. So I've kind of combined the two into, okay, I'm going to fight for beauty, and I'm going to, fight for the creation and God and future generations. And they've had a huge influence on my life. Huge influence.
Wow. That is so cool. So, besides asking Chat GPT about Yeshua, you also asked if 5G was part of the agenda, and it definitely said it was, but there's no 6G.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. That doesn't make sense to me. And to let you know, and you'll appreciate this, is that I have been fighting against 5G since 2017, after Verizon had come in here and tried to put 8 antennas in our downtown historic Nevada City. And we found out after we sent them packing that instead of being 2,000 or 4,000 watt antennas, there are 15,600 watts pointed at the ground. And I was like, wow, they just tried to weaponize 3G, 4G antennas against my town. And we were a town of activists. And the main power beams are focused in front of the restaurant I own. I own an organic little taco, hole in the wall taco restaurant. And so
those are the best kind.
They are. I agree with you. It was delicious. But nonetheless, so I started fighting against 5G. And then what happened, and this is really interesting, and you'll appreciate knowing this, was confirmation. When I was mayor and COVID struck, we had our stay-at-home orders, I began to wonder, well, what in the hell is going on in the middle of the night? Like, anything could happen. And we have no idea. We're all locked away. So I would just randomly at midnight, at 2, at 4, at 3, at different times, jump in my car in my pajamas, and I just drive around my town, see if anything's going on. I drive around the county, see if anything's going on. And within just a matter of a few nights, I start to see something happening over and over and over again. And I was like, what the hell is this? From 3 to 5:30 every night, I would see a fleet of utility trucks coming on in to all over our community. I'd start seeing them just at 3 o'clock. And they go out there, and you have from pole to pole, you have the broadband, right? That main, backbone of the wire of broadband. And you see there's like these big coils to be just left there on a pole, but you never see them like extending the broadband. So they do it from 3 in the morning till 5:30 before rush hour. It wasn't much of a rush hour, but still they do it in this 2.5 hour period of time, which is not really cost effective. They'd extend the broadband from pole to pole, and they kept extending the broadband, which is the backbone of 5G, more out into the rural areas. So I was like, what the hell is this? Obviously, I know as a former elected official, this had to be years of preparation, hiring, training, purchasing all the product, all of that, right? This is like, doesn't just randomly happen. Then you do it for 2.5 hours every night. What the hell? What is this? I contact Daphne Talkover, who at that time was working with Children's Health Defense in California. She was head of the 5G department. I said, Daphne, I had her up like about 8 years ago to do a presentation on 5G up here. I said, Daphne, I said, I have to tell you what we're seeing. In addition, we're seeing throughout all these different schools in Lake Tahoe and other areas in Northern California that they're coming in to change the HVAC systems, improve the HVAC systems. But we're seeing they're putting in 5G into the schools. We're putting in the backbone into the schools. And she said, Reinette, it's happening everywhere, all throughout the United States. Well, then afterwards, in the summer of 2020, I started to do interviews because it was very quiet at that time. There were not a lot of people really speaking out. And I'm like, where is everybody? And so I started doing interviews, and I would interview people in Ireland and Israel and other places. And I asked everyone around the world, you were locked away when you came out. Were there cell antennas everywhere? Were there towers everywhere? Were there antennas on top of, schools and homes and businesses and towers along the highways? And everyone's like, yes, 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 yes. And I'm like, obviously 5G is part of the COVID plan. And I have no doubt that those who were injected are going to be far, far, far more vulnerable than us who were not injected. But nobody can say
Well, Montagnier, the Nobel Prize winner, predicted everybody who took the bioweapon will be dead in a decade.
I'm seeing that now.
We're seeing them
we're seeing
all over
that.
the place. Yeah.
Yes, I am. I have my neighbors who I really cared for and love. And, you know, we've kind of parted ways, many of us, not all, but many, because of COVID. They didn't like my stance. They didn't understand. It was great psychological warfare, because as soon as they said it's not for you, it's for your grandparents and your neighbor. And I was saying, no, 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 do not fear. You're okay. You don't have to wear a mask. You don't have to be afraid. Go get vitamin D, take your zinc, your vitamin C, go grow your food. That's it. Don't be in fear. All of a sudden they looked at me like, Reinette, how can you not go along with that, the collective, the group think? Because, you know, we thought you cared about us. We thought you dedicated 20 years of your life to this community. How could you not care for us? Therefore, you know, and they thought I was the Antichrist, essentially. And I tried to convince them, but so most have not come around, and most of them I see very sick now, and many of them dying or have died or are on their way. It's watching a train wreck in slow motion. It's brutal to watch, because these are people I've loved for decades.
Yeah, Healthy Heeg says 7 to 10 years max. Yeah, Luc Montagnier, the Nobel Prize winner.
Yeah, and he's spot on. Yeah, right.
Well, so let's. So we've talked about your seventh generation website, but let's talk about your efforts about geoengineering as well. I've had Dane Wigington on. I got to say, back in the day, I was working with a DEA special agent pilot, and he had told me back then. And I just didn't believe it. But now I've seen everything. No, I've seen the blueprints. I've seen the chemtrails. I've had Dane on. You know, I totally know it's now true. I just could not believe the scope of it. Okay,
so I'm going to tell you something. You're going to be on the cutting edge of this one. So I've been in the geoengineering fight for, well, now about 20 years, almost 20 years. And I started noticing in 2005 and 2007, something was wrong with the skies. And I had sailed as a young girl to escape my overbearing parents. We lived on a lake. So I was always sailing and always looking at the skies, didn't see the streaks. And then in two years ago, we had a catastrophic snowfall here, like 60 feet in the Tahoe, and pine trees were collapsing and roofs were collapsing. I'm like, I'm done with this. It's all, you know, the weather's been weaponized. So I began to take that to court, essentially, that narrative. And when I started to put it together, things started to fall apart quite quickly. And I had to stand back, Jeff, because I was saying to myself, well, this is not the narrative that I'm familiar with. It's not the narrative I've been spreading. There's some truths and there's some things that aren't accurate. And I've got to really like have a come to Jesus conversation with myself and say, what are you here for? Are you here to just back up what you believe? Are you here to back up a narrative you've never really gone and proven to yourself? Are you here to get to the truth, no matter what that road is? I'm like, I'm here to get to the truth. So ultimately, I'm going to cut to the chase. The geoengineering programs are happening: stratospheric aerosol injections, solar radiation management, solar dimming, cloud seeding. They're all happening. But this is a thing. There's something that's happening in our skies that have got to be differentiated and have to be pointed out and separated. There's two different things being conflated here. The geoengineering programs and projects that are happening, they don't generally happen, except for cloud seeding, the only exception. They generally don't happen in the troposphere. The troposphere is like up to 39,000 feet, and it wavers depending on the season and where you are on the planet. But that is where commercial aviation is. A few thousand feet up is where cloud seeding is happening. But most of that stuff will rain out in a matter of a few days, a storm, or like a couple of weeks max. Those programs that you're talking about and your friend was talking about is actually happening up in the stratosphere. Why? You get more bang for the buck. Those programs, when you spray anything out there, they'll last 2 years, 4 years. It won't be rained out whatsoever. And this is the big thing. What we've been conflating, and this is really important, I want to make sure, again, on people understanding, I'm not saying that the clandestine programs are not happening. I have no doubt they're continuing. Been going on since, you know, the Ho Chi Minh Trail and Operation Pot Pie. But the thing is this, is that what we've conflated, and the anti-geoengineering legislation we're seeing passed in the states is saying, okay, we're gonna stop these clandestine programs, therefore we're no longer going to see the streaks in the sky, is incorrect. Those clandestine programs are naked, are unseen to the naked eye. You cannot see them with the naked eye whatsoever. They're invisible to the naked eye. What we are seeing is commercial aviation jet exhaust when the atmospheric conditions are just right. However, this is the thing. These clandestine programs are not good for us, not good for the people, not good for the planet. But neither is the commercial aviation. But we're conflating the two. And what's happening is we are seeing high levels of aluminum and heavy metals in rainwater samples, soil samples, in tree bark, and so on. And we're saying, well, that's because we're being sprayed. We might be being sprayed, but those persistent contrails, the AKA chemtrails that we call them, is actually from jet exhaust. But this is the bummer. That jet exhaust creates sulfur dioxide. And then it creates acid rain. And when that acid rain hits the soil, it actually creates this chemical, exchange where it changes the pH balance in the soil. And it now allows the aluminum that's naturally found in the soil to become bioavailable. It actually creates a chain reaction that now allows the aluminum in the soil to be absorbed by the trees, like the ponderosa and the trees you've seen exploding in fires, in your crops, in your water. And there's a reason why we are seeing such a huge uptick in neurological issues, in Alzheimer's, in memory, and so on, not just in adults, not just in children, but even in honeybees in their brains, because we are actually releasing the aluminum found in the soil, not because these planes are spraying it. It's intentionally, it's supposedly unintentional, not that it can't be weaponized, but it's unintentional, but it's actually creating acid rain. And no one's talking about acid rain. They're talking about climate change, which is a boondoggle, which is a scam. We should be talking about acid rain, because right now we have 50 million flights a year, and that we get another 5 million flights per year. It's exploding exponentially. So I'm here to tell you that I've now been working on a petition for rulemaking, because I want to take the EPA, and this is the thing with the anti-geoengineering legislation we've been seeing. Later on, they found out, hey, why are the streaks not going away? What's happening? We don't understand. States have no jurisdiction over the airways, 400 feet up. That's FAA, right? That's the EPA. That's the Clean Air Act. Well, guess what? Back in 1963, when the Clean Air Act started, the EPA said, hey, yeah, we know that commercial aviation is leaving persistent contrails. We know it's not good, but it's just the cost of doing business. Well, we had 300,000 flights a year then. Now we're at 50 million and climbing every day. They've not touched aviation whatsoever for over 60 years. So I want to take that to court to say, hey, you guys are derelict in duty. You've got to do this, and that. So in order for me to take the EPA, California EPA, the FAA, the California Air Resource Board to court, I must first do what's called a petition for rulemaking. Because if I take them to court, the judge will say, well, did you exhaust all avenues to get them to do what you wanted? And if I say no, they're like, we're going to throw you out of court and go do a petition for rulemaking, tell them what the problem is, show them the evidence, make your case and your argument, and give them some time to correct themselves. And if they don't, then you can take them to court. So for this whole entire year, 2025, I've been completely ensconced in all the research, creating the document, the strategy, the argument. I have 125 citations, dozens and dozens of footnotes, and this is going to be a petition for rulemaking that I'm sending off. But it's also going to be a white paper, because when I have people saying, Reinette, there's someone putting a gun to your head, you must work for the CIA, what happened to you, someone got a hold of you. I'm like, no, you guys, I'm just telling you, we're conflating two different things. And the clandestine programs need the approach that we're seeing, which is through legislation. It needs to go through federal, now become federal legislation. Then it needs to go global, because right now you cannot use weather wars during a time of war, but you can do it during a time of peace. And that's a big loophole. So that has to be approached that way.
Why is that?
Because that's the NMOD agreement. So when we were raining out and using weather wars, using cloud seeding during the Vietnam War and Ho Chi Minh Trail, just try to rain out the supply chain, we actually weaponized weather modification.
Right.
And NMOD came along. This is a global treaty saying, okay, you cannot use weather as a mechanism of war during a time of war. But you can use it during a time of peace, and you can use it against your own people if you want to. There's no protection there whatsoever.
Well, no one's declared war in the United States since World War II, I believe.
Well, right, exactly, and right. So there's no war here. So we're in a time of peace. So they can use this and weaponize this against us every which way.
But to clarify, and I appreciate all your work, but so with Dane Wigington, when you see the blueprints, the patents, you see the film of the cylinders inside the commercial aircraft. And I do know from working in special operations that commercial aircraft are used for clandestine and covert purposes.
Right.
How do you explain that? If you're saying you're saying that none of the chemtrails are contrails, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that the clandestine programs are happening. But when they happen and when they're doing this, they're doing it out in the stratosphere because they want that stuff to last as long as possible.
No, I got it. But
right. And it's also warm. So believe it or not, the troposphere is where weather happens. That's where you get bumpy plane rides and so on. And that's where commercial aviation is for the most part. However, the jet set fly up in the stratosphere because they get better gas mileage and there's no bumpiness whatsoever. But what I'm saying is those programs, when they are laying out their programs and they're spewing something, they're up in the stratosphere, and the stratosphere, believe it or not, is warmer than the troposphere. So in order for you to see a persistent contrail, for you to see jet exhaust, you have to have the right barometric pressure, particulate matter, extreme cold, like 44 below Fahrenheit, and enough moisture. And when it's just right, that is when you will see persistent contrails. So those programs that he's talking about, I'm not arguing at all. I have no doubt they're still going. There's nothing stopping them. But they're up in the stratosphere where streaks do not happen. And what's happening is we're mixing up. And you can go to anyone who's in Tennessee or they're in Florida, wherever this anti-geoengineering legislation has happened, you're going to ask them, are you still seeing streaks in the sky? And they're going to say, yeah, I don't understand why. Because you're conflating two different things. Now,
you're right. It's a federal program. It's state legislation is not going to do anything. It's a huge clandestine program.
Now, I want to speak to this, and this is so we've got to deal with the acid rain, the sulfur dioxide that's actually in the jet exhaust. That's got to be dealt with, and that's a little bit trickier and a longer road. But I want to say this, and this is a big game changer for me. And please ask any of your military friends. So a year and a half ago, a gentleman came to me named Jeff Ray, who actually only lives about a half hour from me, but he was watching my work at Save Our Skies. He goes, Reinette, I want to help you. I want you to understand what's going on in the skies. He goes, I'm a meteorologist. He goes, I used to work in the Navy and I was on an aircraft carrier. It was my job, and you may not know this, he said, but around the world, every 12 hours, there's people who step on out. They got this thing called radiosonde, and it's connected to a weather balloon, and they go out and they release it, and they're all about 150 to 200 miles apart for the most part. And what happens is radiosonde collects all that data, that barometric pressure, the moisture, the particulate matter, all that stuff, and then it's put into what's called an Appleman chart. He goes, my job on the aircraft carrier was to identify where in the atmosphere, according to that radiosonde data, every 12 hours, where our jets could leave the aircraft carrier, fly at one level, and return without a persistent contrail behind it, telling the enemy where the ship was. And I said, that's a thing? He goes, yes. Not only is it a thing, but what I'd like to do is I would like to actually, for the next 2 to 3 weeks, every morning, I'm going to look at the radiosonde data, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you're going to be seeing in your skies, whether you're going to be seeing short, long, or no persistent contrails whatsoever, according to the radiosonde data. This Jeff Ray came along, and every day he's like, Reinette, this is what you're going to see, long, short, nothing at all. It's going to be beautiful. And so after 2.5, 3 weeks, he had me convinced. I was like, holy cow, this is real. Now, most people don't have a meteorologist at their fingertips available to prove this, but there's a game changer in the anti-geoengineering world about 6 months ago. There's windy.com. Windy.com is an online platform that shows you weather. And when you go on there, you can actually find one of their plugins called Contrail Finder. So you upload that, and then ultimately what you can do is you can click on your area, and you click on your area once you've uploaded that little plugin, and it's all free. You can just sign up, but it's all free. And what happens is that you can then click on your area, and it will tell you, it'll take that radiosonde data I was talking about earlier, and it will actually say to you, okay, you're going to see short persistent contrails at 32,000 feet, long at 42,000 feet, or nothing whatsoever. So we've been training on Save Our Skies. We have saveourskies.org. Every second Tuesday, fourth Wednesday of the month, we teach people how to read the skies. We teach them how to use windy.com, how to look at the the radiosonde data, and so on.
How do you spell that radiosonde?
Radio, so RADIO, and then sonde, I'm pretty sure is SONDE, radiosonde data. And so ultimately, this little plugin, we have all these individuals who have been exactly like me going, okay, they're spraying us today. Damn it, it's making me angry. I feel like I can't go outside. They start using it. And there's like this morning I was there, I checked my radio, I checked windy.com, and it said, oh, persistent contrails here and there. And I didn't really see it. But then I looked out 2 hours later. I'm like, oh, here they're starting to form. And so that has changed the anti-geoengineering world, the movement, because all of a sudden people are realizing, you're right, we're conflating two different things. And the approach is that clandestine programs have to be dealt at the state and federal level, as well as the international level. and the persistent contrails, which are equally bad because it's unlocking all the aluminum in our soil, acid rain, killing everything, causing us to have Alzheimer's, has to be dealt in a different way. And that's really ultimately the job of the agencies who've been derelict in their duty. Now, what I've shared with you is highly, highly controversial, and I've pissed a lot of people off. But this petition for rulemaking—
Oh, you can be in my club.
I'm already there, actually. But my point is this: when I get done, this petition for rulemaking is a serious piece of document, highly, highly footnoted. So when people say you're full of it, I'm like, well, okay, but please read this, and at the very least, you have to say there is something here. We've got to at least consider it. And I want our blue skies back more than anyone, Jeff, because I'm dedicating a lot of time and work towards this. And I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to go out and enjoy myself. And right now, I'm in front of the screen, working with chat, doing whatever I can, a huge learning curve, and I'm putting all the pieces together. And I have to thank Jim Lee from climateviewer.com and a group of researchers he has. They gave me a lot of information. I ran with that. I'm taking my own information, creating the strategy, creating the argument, creating all the background. And ultimately, if I have to, I will take this into court, pro se. I will litigate it. I'm not an attorney, but I do know that I can pro se go litigate, and I'm going to. And the reason why is I was working with attorneys a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and they just can't wrap their minds around this. They've got other things, other fights, other court battles. And this is so thick. It is so huge of a topic that I realize you've got to live and breathe this in order to argue it in court and win, if that's what it's going to take.
Well, that's great work. And I saw on one of your websites that you have states, units in different states. Which one is that? And
well, referendums. So you're talking about referendums and so on. Is that correct?
yeah,
Gen
yeah.
7. So Gen 7 is referendum states, and that's essentially teaching people, mostly it's west of the Mississippi, but basically people don't realize is that our legislators are not the only ones who can put forward a referendum or write legislation or a bill. We can do it ourselves. So what we've been doing with gen7.org, and actually Save Our Skies kind of is the first real initiative, is we're not writing legislation right now and teaching people how to write legislation, how to get bills authored and passed, but we're also just trying to teach people about what your rights are and how you can fight and what your agencies should be doing, what they aren't doing. And if you have to take this to court or have legislation written, this is how you do it.
What website is that again?
That one is Gen 7. So it's GENSEVEN for 7 generations, gen7.org.
Gen7.org.
Right.
Okay.
And then save
so
our—
for Team America, that's the site that you would go to in the chat there.
And then saveourskies.org is the website about what we're working on right now. And what I really encourage people is don't discount what I have to say. Please, it's really important to keep a malleable mind here because this is a massive, massive topic. It's been very humbling, to just say the least, for me. And I ask and I encourage people, please don't give her over your agency. Don't believe a word I have to say. On the 27th of August, Wednesday, 6 p.m. Pacific, we have another Save Our Skies Swarm webinar. We go 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, and we go into the details. We hold your hand, teach you how to read the meteorology, how to go on to windy.com, share all the evidence we have so you can actually come to your own conclusion. And that's what we're actually, people is like, come to your own conclusion. Don't believe me. Don't believe anybody else. Come to your own conclusion. And so, again, I'm not saying that this narrative over here is not true. I'm just saying we're conflating two different things, and it's paramount. It's critical. We separate. There's two different things going on in the skies. Each one is bad in its own way, and each one needs to be approached in a different way completely. And that is what we're really trying to get the word out to people.
Awesome. And S Down has published Radio Son's website in the chat.
Thank you for doing that. That's the Radio Son data, and we have Jeff Ray, the meteorologist. He'll come into it and he'll get into the nitty gritty. And sometimes I'll just kind of share it because I'm more the 30,000 foot level. He'll get sometimes a little bit too technical, but it's still very important.
I'm real familiar with weather officers and special weather officers, and I've had to brief with them and work with them many times. I'm not familiar with Radio Son, but that's not a jump at all.
Right. No, it's not. So in fact, I encourage people, talk to the pilots, talk to anybody who were, they were flying, right? They were off the carriers, the ships, and yep. They, is this true?
It's like following the wake. It's just like following the carrier wake. Yeah.
100%. So this was a game changer for me. And when that happened, and Jeff Ray proved to me, like, no, this is actually commercial aviation, sometimes military, jet exhaust, when the atmospheric conditions are just right. And let me tell you what's crazy. It's only like 2, maybe 5% of all aviation over our heads that is actually leaving a persistent contrail behind it. And right now, there's a contrails research roadmap that says, okay, we have to deal with persistent contrails by 2050 because it's dimming the sun. In fact, David Keith, who is a well-known geoengineer, who said basically we can go out there and spray, aluminum, and yeah, it's going to be on the shoulders of our grandchildren, but oh well, we can dim the sun. He even just recently, a year ago, said, look, we don't need to go out there and do solar dimming. We don't need to go out there and do clandestine programs. Why? Because commercial aviation is doing it for us.
Wow.
So it's like now, but this is the sticker. This is the sticker, right? Can that be weaponized? Yeah, there is AI. There is software out there right now that we could use to ensure that those 2 to 5% of planes that are flying and leaving a persistent contrail behind them do not. So we don't have the crisscrosses and the sun is not blocked. There's a host of bad things that happens when that happens. So there is actually AI and software that could actually do that for us now. But with that said, that same software could take those flights and actually weaponize them. Just like we could weaponize water. It could be used for good or bad. They could use that software and have planes fly in a certain area so it does block the sun.
Well, I think it has been. I think it is another part of democide.
Well, and there's no one talking about that. There's no one's talking about that. There's nothing stopping that whatsoever. And so we're like, again, guys, we've got to separate what's happening in the sky so we can deal with them independently and respectfully, because this is something else that if we continue to ignore what commercial aviation is doing, and it is growing on an exponential curve, only 20% of global population's ever flown. And now you have nations building airports and starting airlines, and that number is going to increase. It increases right now 5 million additional flights every 5 million every year. So next year's going to be 55 million, and the next year's going to be 60 million, and our skies are going to be getting widened out. We're in a very dangerous runway right now. We've got to correct our course. So that really requires a very open dialogue of understanding there's two different things going on, and they have to be addressed separately. And and with us, by ignoring commercial aviation, we're allowing them just to continue to grow without any recourse or responsibility or accountability. But also that could become weaponized, and maybe it's already been weaponized, but we don't know because we don't even talk about it.
No, well, I think it has been. Otherwise, why would it be clandestine?
Yeah.
I think it's another part of democide.
100%. It's blocking our sun. You're losing photosynthesis, crops, vitamin D. It does a number on people psychologically. We need our sun. And right now, by just ignoring it or possibly even weaponizing it because no one's paying attention, we're in harm's way. And so I'm really going out there saying, look, I'm not saying the clandestine programs aren't happening and they've got to come to a stop. That's almost easier because you can stop the funding. You can have whistleblowers. What's difficult with the commercial aviation is you have the aviation industry who has sunk $100,000 to $300,000 per plane to build it. They want to return in their investment, which is going to be 35 years or so per plane. And so they're not going to just change easily. And so we have to have a real serious conversation about what is commercial aviation doing to our health. And it's actually called aviation-induced mortality. It is a thing.
Yeah. No, it is. Have you talked to Dane Wigington at Geoengineering at all?
I did. And he was not happy about me doing this. I was shocked by this. I was shocked. But that does not stop me. It's like, okay, you do your thing and I'll do my thing, and someday we'll meet in the middle.
Well, we really need to work together. We really don't need to fight amongst ourselves. There's they love that.
And so my whole thing is just, we've got to understand what's really clearly going on. And it's so important that I make sure that we have these 2 Save Our Skies webinars every single month. And our next one is the 27th of August on Wednesday, because it is such a departure from what I believed for 15 years, now I'm 20. And a lot of people, that it's like, we got to let people know, like, this is what's going on and this is how you fight this and this is how you fight that. And they're equally important. But again, if people don't want to believe me, I just say, give it another year. You're going to see all these states continue to pass this anti-geoengineering legislation, and you're going to notice the streaks aren't disappearing. Why? Because you're stopping this, thinking it's the streaks in the sky, and it's not. Those are 2 different things.
So, Carolina, Dane's not happy because she's disagreeing with his thesis that contrails are chemtrails, is what right. Dane's not happy about.
And they are chemtrails essentially, because they are full of chemicals and heavy metals and sulfur dioxide, but
Yeah.
they're not being spewed purposely on us, but they are still causing havoc on the environment and our health overall. Absolutely, they're causing havoc.
So, well, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on, and tell everybody your websites one more time. Your Substack too.
Okay, so Substack is probably the best place to find me because the day of our Save Our Skies Storm webinar, I put out a notice, join me tonight. Here's a link. And that is my name, Reinette Senum's Foghorn Express.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that one. I published it on my locals and my Patreon, but I forgot to mention it.
Right.
Yes.
So just put Foghorn Express, you'll find
Foghorn
me.
Express, and you'll
And
find.
I give you
Reinette.
the latest on geoengineering. In fact, when we have finalized that petition for rulemaking, I'm going to be doing a huge old Substack on that, and we're going to be just going down just bit by bit and breaking it down, saying this is what's going on, so people have an understanding. And then if you want, you can check out Gen 7, and then SaveOurSkies.org is actually where we put up every when we have our Save Our Skies Storm webinar. We put the link up there. You can find us here tonight. But really, Reinette Senum's FoghornExpress.substack.com is where I go, and I'm most active, and you can find the updates and so on by far.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have you back when you are ready for that. And thank you for staying in the fight. I know it's exhausting to stay in the fight, and I am glad you are in it.
Well, same here. Thank you. I'm so glad for your brain and your experience. I so appreciate you as well. And I'd love to come back and share with you, because I think the public deserve to hear what's going on. So I've been working hard on that. Love the opportunity. So thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. God bless. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that was a great guest, and she told me she used to listen to my stuff, so that's an honor as well. A lot to process there. Check out my Patreon and locals for all of her stuff and get in the fight there. And remember, a secret told isn't. No communications are secure. All security is breachable. All codes are hackable. Concealment is not cover. All cover is temporary. All codes are breakable. Use a one-time pad one time. There's one at jeffreyprather.com/shop. Looking is not seeing. Hearing is not listening. Moving is not action. Knowledge is not wisdom. Perseverance beats talent every time. Power is not force. Hope is not a plan. Plans are useless. Planning is invaluable. Develop the situation before it develops you. Training is essential. The most committed wins. Freedom is never given. It is earned, fought for, won, and taken. So take it.